Billionaire Daniel Reed installed cameras to watch his paralyzed triplets, not because he wanted to spy, but because fear had become the only thing he trusted. 11 caregivers had walked into his home with smiles, and every one of them left him with more damage, more betrayal, more pieces of himself to gather from the floor. So Daniel watched everything, every room, every hour, praying he would not wake up to another mistake, praying he would not lose more than he already had. One night, he opened the camera feed with a tired heart, the kind of tired that grows inside you when life has been unkind for too long. He expected to see what he always saw: 3 small wheelchairs in the therapy room, 3 little boys sitting still like time had forgotten them, 3 futures weighed down by doctors, words that killed hope before it even began. But what he saw made his hands shake, his breath stop, and his whole world bend in a way he could not understand. His sons, the boys doctors said would never stand, were not sitting. They were moving, tiny shaky steps, reaching towards someone they trusted more than the world. And in that moment, Daniel felt something deep inside him wake up, something he buried the day his wife died, something that scared him more than anything he had ever felt. 2 years ago, Daniel Reed lost everything that mattered. His wife Megan took her last breath in a bright hospital room that felt too quiet, too cold, too heavy for a moment that should have been filled with joy. 45 minutes after delivering their triplets, she was gone. No warning, no chance to hold the babies she loved before she even saw them, no chance to say goodbye to the man she promised forever to. Daniel held her hand until the warmth left her fingers, and the silence in that room felt like something closing around his heart. He whispered her name again and again, hoping she would open her eyes, but the world had already decided it was time for her to go. When he finally walked out of that room, he felt like he was walking through thick air, like every step took all the strength he had left. The hallway lights looked too bright, the hospital walls looked too white, and the sound of machines from the NICU pulled him forward even though he felt like falling. 3 premature babies waited for him in their tiny beds, 3 little bodies surrounded by tubes, soft beeping, and nurses moving quickly but gently around them. The babies were so small, their fingers were the size of seeds, their chests rising and falling like they were fighting for every breath. Daniel stood there with empty arms, trembling hands, and eyes full of tears he tried to hold back. The nurse pointed to each incubator. Lucas, the firstborn, the quietest. Mason, the one who tried to move his tiny fingers even on the first day. Jaden, the smallest, the one who needed the most help to breathe. These were the children Megan prayed for, cried for, dreamed of. Children she talked about every night as she planned the kind of mother she wanted to be. But now she was gone, and Daniel stood alone beside 3 babies who did not understand the loss they had already suffered. Days passed slowly after that. Daniel slept on the hospital bench, ate food he barely tasted, signed forms he did not remember reading. Doctors spoke to him with gentle voices, but their words sounded heavy. The boys were too early, too weak, too fragile. They needed time, support, prayer, patience. Daniel nodded to everything, but his mind stayed in that delivery room, stuck on the image of Megan's hand growing cold in his. When the boys finally came home months later, life did not become easier. The doctors gave the first painful news during a follow-up check. Cerebral palsy, severe. The kind that affects muscles, balance, movement, even control of their own bodies. The kind that makes simple things feel impossible. Daniel felt the room tilt as he listened, his heart beating slowly like it was trying to hold itself together. He asked questions, but he barely understood the answers. The doctors explained scans, brain development, damaged pathways, but all Daniel heard was one sentence, repeated over and over: walking is very unlikely, maybe never. He drove home that day with the boys in the back seat, each strapped into a car seat made for children who needed extra support. The sky looked too bright for such painful news, the road too long, the world too loud. He cried in the car, trying to wipe his tears before the boys made small sounds, sounds he could not ignore even in his grief. He wanted to be strong for them, but every part of him felt broken. Months turned into a year, then into 2. The triplets sat in small wheelchairs with colorful designs, but nothing in those chairs felt joyful. Their legs stayed stiff, their arms moved only a little, their heads tilted in ways that showed how much effort every second took. Daniel hired therapists, specialists, nurses, anyone who said they could help. He bought expensive equipment, took the boys to appointments twice a week, tried stretches he was taught, tried exercises he did not fully understand, but nothing changed. The boys did not reach for toys, did not lift their heads for long, did not move the way toddlers should. And the more time passed, the more Daniel felt hope slip farther away from him. Then came the caregivers. 11 of them. 11 disappointments. One ignored the boys for hours while scrolling on her phone. Another quit after 2 weeks because she could not handle the sadness of the house. One woman stole medicine. One accessed his bank accounts. One took pictures of the boys' equipment and sold them for gossip. Every betrayal made Daniel feel less human, less trusting, more trapped. He started watching people through a screen instead of facing them in real life. Fear taught him to expect the worst, so he installed cameras in every corner of the mansion, telling himself it was protection, when deep down he knew it was because he no longer believed anyone could care for his sons without hurting them. By the time caregiver number 12 arrived, Daniel felt almost empty. Her name was Tiana Brooks, a 29-year-old woman with soft eyes and a quiet voice. She stood in his living room with her hands folded, waiting for instructions, but Daniel spoke without looking at her face. "Follow the medical plan," he told her. "No changes, no experiments, no personal ideas." He wanted her to do the job like a machine, without emotions, without dreams, without hope. Hope scared him. Hope made him feel like he might lose again. The house stayed quiet most days. Daniel moved from his office to his bedroom, from his bedroom to the kitchen, avoiding the therapy room because seeing his son struggle made his chest ache in ways he did not know how to fix. But he always watched the cameras. Late at night, early in the morning, during moments when silence felt too heavy. He watched Tiana move around the boys gently, watched her adjust blankets, fix toys, whisper to them even when they did not look at her. He saw her wait patiently for tiny movements that almost never came. Yet in that waiting, something unsettling began to happen. Something small. Something Daniel almost missed the first time. Lucas turned his head toward a sound. Mason moved his fingers toward a toy. Jaden kept his eyes open longer than usual. Small things, but things Daniel had never seen before, things he did not understand, things that stirred something painful and unfamiliar inside him. Hope. And hope, for Daniel, was the most terrifying thing of all. The morning light entered the mansion softly, but nothing about the house felt warm. Daniel Reed stood at the kitchen counter with a cup of coffee he could not bring himself to drink. His hands were wrapped around the mug, yet his mind was far away, drifting back to the hospital hallways, drifting back to the moment everything in his life changed. He tried not to remember too much, because remembering made his chest tighten, but memories had a habit of crawling back when the house was quiet. He heard the faint sound of the motorized wheelchair down the hallway, the soft whir that meant one of the boys was being moved by the morning nurse. The sound should have brought comfort, but instead it made Daniel feel an ache he could not explain. He listened, frozen in place, waiting to hear a small cry, or a laugh, or anything that sounded like life, but the hallway stayed quiet again, and silence settled over him like a heavy blanket. He set the coffee cup down and walked toward his office. His footsteps slow, the floor cold under his feet. He passed the framed spaces on the wall, pictures he once had up, pictures Megan insisted on placing there. She said a house needed faces to feel alive. Daniel had taken them down months after her death, unable to walk past her smile every day. The faint outlines of where the frames once hung still remained, like ghosts of a life he almost had. He entered his office and sat in his chair, staring at the 3 camera screens mounted on the wall. He felt a pinch in his chest every time he looked at them, yet he could not stay away. The screens had become a strange comfort, a place where he could watch life without touching it, a way to stay connected without letting himself feel too much. He clicked on the live feed for the therapy room. There they were, his sons. Lucas sat in his blue wheelchair, head leaning to one side. Mason looked toward the window, his fingers curled tightly. Jaden rested with his eyes half closed, his breathing steady. They were small, too small for boys their age, and seeing them like this made Daniel feel a sadness he did not know how to carry. Tiana moved between them quietly. She adjusted blankets, straightened toys, gently touched their hands. Her movements were slow, patient, careful, as if she understood the weight of every moment. Daniel watched her closely, trying to catch any sign of failure, any sign she would become like the others, but every morning she did the same thing, a routine that looked simple but carried something deeper. He watched as she sat in front of them, hands folded in her lap, simply watching them breathe. 10 full minutes passed like that, no talking, no rushing, no fear. Daniel frowned at the screen. Why was she sitting still? Why was she wasting time? But then he looked closer. She was not wasting anything. She was learning them, studying the way Lucas flinched when the light hit his eyes, the way Mason's breathing changed when he was uncomfortable, the way Jaden moved his fingers whenever he sensed someone near. Daniel leaned back slowly, a strange feeling forming in his chest. He did not like how observant she was. He did not like how calm she seemed. He did not like how she made things look too easy. People always made things look easy in the beginning. Then the truth came out. Then the disappointment came. Then the betrayal came. He forced the thought away and kept watching. At exactly 7:23, Tiana reached into her bag and pulled out a small speaker, the same one she used yesterday. She placed it on the shelf and pressed play. Soft piano music filled the therapy room, the kind of music Megan used to listen to on Sunday mornings. Daniel felt a sting behind his eyes, but blinked it away quickly. This was not the time to remember Megan's smile, or the way she danced around the kitchen with her belly full of babies she already loved. He looked back at the screen. Lucas turned his head. It was slow, barely noticeable, but it happened. He moved toward the music. Tiana noticed instantly. She did not smile too widely. She did not cheer. She just nodded softly, as if she had been expecting it. She raised the volume by a small amount. Then something else happened. Mason's fingers twitched on his armrest, the smallest motion, but Daniel saw it clearly. His breath caught in his throat. Tiana moved closer, kneeling beside him, her voice gentle. "You like this song, sweetheart," she whispered. "My grandmother played it for me when I was your age." Daniel stared at the screen, as if the world had paused. He had never heard anyone speak to his sons like that, not with that tone, not with that patience, not with that kind of natural love. Tiana placed her hand near Mason's, not touching him, just offering warmth. She waited, still and quiet, the kind of quiet that felt safe, not heavy. Mason did not move again, but his breathing changed, slow and steady, almost relaxed. Daniel exhaled slowly, but he did not trust the feeling crawling into his chest. He forced his mind back into caution. This could be nothing, he told himself. Just a flinch, just coincidence, just luck. Hope was dangerous. He could not let it settle in too fast. Then came the storybook. At 9:30, Daniel watched Tiana pull out a children's book from her bag, the same one she read the day before. She sat on the floor, cross-legged, opened the book, and began. Her voice filled the room, soft and warm, telling a story about a little rabbit who wanted to fly even though everyone told him he could not. She read in different voices, changing her tone gently, pausing sometimes as if she wanted the boys to feel every word. Daniel felt his chest tighten again. Tiana looked at the boys as she read, trying to catch their reactions, trying to understand things even he no longer paid attention to. When she got to the part where the rabbit climbed the hill again and again, she asked the boys what they thought. None of them responded, but Jaden's eyes opened wider, and he looked at her face with a kind of attention Daniel had never seen. He blinked hard. That was not normal, not for Jaden. Daniel stood up from his chair without realizing it. He stepped closer to the screen, staring at his youngest son. Jaden did not look away from Tiana, not once, not even when she turned the page. A heavy feeling settled in Daniel's stomach, a feeling mixed with fear and something else he had not felt in a long time. He stepped back slowly, his hands shaking slightly. He could not deny what he was seeing anymore. Something was changing. Something was happening in that room. And Daniel did not know if he was ready for it. Night came quietly inside the Reed mansion, the kind of quiet that made every small sound feel louder. Daniel sat alone in his office again, the blue glow from the camera screens shining on his tired face. He told himself he was watching only because he needed to protect his sons, but deep down, he knew the truth. He was watching because something inside him had started to shift, something he did not trust yet, something that made his heart feel both full and afraid at the same time. For the past 3 weeks, he had watched Tiana with the boys every day, and every night he told himself the same thing: this cannot last. People always changed, people always disappointed, people always left. That belief had kept him safe for a long time, or at least he thought it did. But the more he watched the screens, the more he saw something he could not ignore. His sons were responding. Tiny movements, small reactions, small breaths that sounded different, eyes that stayed open longer, hands that reached even if it was only a few inches. It was not enough to call a miracle, but it was enough to make Daniel feel a kind of fear that came only when hope tried to return to a broken heart. He leaned closer to the monitor now, watching the afternoon footage again, rewinding certain moments, slowing down others. He watched Tiana move Lucas's legs in that walking pattern, slow and steady. He watched Mason try to reach toward a toy truck she placed a little too far from his fingers. He watched Jaden follow her voice across the room with his eyes, something he had never done before. Daniel rubbed his face with both hands, feeling the weight of guilt press against him. For 2 years, he had accepted the doctor's words as final. He had believed the worst, without fighting for more. He had stopped looking for new methods, stopped asking questions, stopped trying to believe. He had buried all of that the day Megan died, because believing again felt like opening a wound that had never healed. He clicked on the live feed for the therapy room. It was almost 9 at night. The boys were supposed to be asleep, and the room should have been dark. Instead, a small lamp glowed softly near the shelf, casting a warm circle of light. Tiana was still there, sitting on the floor with her legs crossed. The boys were in their wheelchairs, placed in a half circle around her. She hummed a tune, a slow, gentle melody that floated through the speakers like a quiet lullaby. Daniel felt his chest tighten. Why was she still here? Why was she not resting? Why did she not treat this like a job that ended at a certain time? He leaned closer, watching her more carefully. Tiana reached for Lucas's hand. She did not grab it, she only placed her fingers over his gently. Her voice was a whisper. You did well today, sweetheart, I am proud of you. I know you are trying. I see it, even if no one else does. Lucas's fingers curled slightly around hers. Daniel's breath broke. He replayed the moment 3 times, then 4, holding onto the edge of the desk as if letting go would make the moment disappear. When he finally sat back, his eyes burned, and he blinked hard to stop the tears. She moved to Mason next, adjusting his blanket even though it was already straight. Her hands touched his hair lightly as she whispered, You are strong, baby, more than anyone knows. I see everything you do, I see how hard you try. Mason's breathing slowed, growing calm, steady, peaceful. Daniel covered his mouth with his hand. Then Tiana went to Jaden, the smallest, the quietest, the one who stayed in his own world most of the day. She lifted his tiny hand and placed it softly against her cheek. Jaden, sweet boy, she whispered, her voice breaking a little. I see you. I see every part of you. I know you are trying. I am right here, and I am not going anywhere. A tear rolled down her cheek. Daniel felt something crack inside him, something deep, something he thought had died with Megan. His throat tightened, and he whispered into the empty air. Why is she doing this? Why does she care so much? The room around him felt small, the walls pressing in. He walked away from the desk, pacing slowly, trying to steady his breath. This was wrong, he told himself. She was getting too attached. She was giving the boys too much hope. She was making him feel things he did not want to feel again. He returned to the desk and reached for his laptop. He opened a new document. A termination letter. The same words he had used before, copied and pasted for every caregiver who disappointed him. Dear Miss Brooks, effective immediately, your services are no longer required. He typed the first line, then stared at it. Something felt wrong. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, unable to move. His heart felt heavy, like something inside him did not want to finish the sentence. He minimized the letter and opened a search engine instead. His hands trembled slightly as he typed, Brain development in children with cerebral palsy. Articles filled the screen instantly. He clicked the first one. He read slowly. Early intervention can improve movement and balance, even in severe cases. He read more. Children who receive consistent motor pattern training show higher chances of progress. He clicked article after article, each one filled with words he never gave himself the courage to look at before. Neural pathways, muscle response, brain plasticity. Hope hidden inside science he never took time to understand. His eyes moved from line to line, and the more he read, the harder it became to breathe. Tiana's methods, her exercises, her patterns, her patience, her belief, Every part of it matched the research he ignored for 2 years. He pushed away from the desk and stood up slowly. Shame washed over him like cold water. For 2 years, he believed the first doctors. He accepted their words like a final truth. He let grief decide what was impossible. But this woman, making $15 an hour, had done more for his sons in 4 weeks than he had done with all his money, all his connections, all his fear. Daniel walked through the house quietly, passing rooms he had not stepped into in months. He stopped at the nursery door and opened it for the first time in a long time. The room looked untouched. 3 cribs sat in a half circle, just like Megan planned. A small rocking chair sat in the corner, her blanket still draped over the side. Dust covered everything. Daniel leaned against the doorframe, unable to step inside. His heart ached, his eyes stung, his chest felt tight. This was the life he wanted, the life Megan wanted, the life that slipped away so quickly. He whispered into the empty room, "I am sorry, Megan, I am so sorry." When he finally closed the door, he felt another ache settle deep inside him. Something had to change. Something had already started to change. He walked back to his office, turned off the camera screens, and sat quietly in the dark. For the first time in 2 years, he did not watch out of fear. He watched because something in that therapy room was waking up the part of him he thought was gone. Tomorrow would come soon, and tomorrow would bring something he was not ready for. Something that would shake him to his core. The next morning came with a kind of silence that felt different from the others. Daniel Reed woke up before the sun rose, his heart beating slowly, almost unsure of what he was supposed to feel. He sat at the edge of his bed, with his hands pressed together, staring at the floor as if answers were hidden in the carpet. Sleep had been impossible. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Tiana's hands holding Jaden's small fingers. He heard her whispering to Lucas and Mason, with a love he did not understand. He saw moments he replayed over and over until the early morning light touched the curtains. He stood slowly and walked into the hallway. The mansion felt colder than usual, and every step he took echoed against the walls. He passed the nursery again, pausing the same way he did the night before. He did not open the door this time. His heart was not ready for that pain again. Not this morning. His feet carried him toward the therapy room, even though he was not sure he wanted to go there. Usually, he avoided being near when the boys were awake. Watching their struggle hurt him, and he often chose the cameras instead, where he could pretend the pain was not as real. But something pulled him today. A quiet pull, something he could not explain. He reached the therapy room door and froze. He heard Tiana's voice inside. Soft, warm, steady. The kind of voice that wrapped gently around the heart. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment. Gathering courage, he did not think he had. Then he opened the door. The room was filled with morning light, brighter than he expected, and the sight inside made his breath catch. Tiana was kneeling beside Mason's wheelchair, holding his hands, slowly guiding them up and down. She did not see Daniel yet. Her focus was fully on the boys. Lucas sat closer to her than usual, his eyes fixed on her face. Jaden looked toward the window, but when Tiana called his name gently, he turned his head the slightest bit. Daniel swallowed hard. Tiana finally noticed him and stood slowly. "Good morning, Mr. Reed," she said softly. Her voice held no fear, only calm patience, like she expected him to be there. Daniel stepped inside, his eyes fixed on his sons. "Why are they not in their medical beds?" he asked quietly, his voice tight. "They are supposed to rest during this time." Tiana nodded respectfully. "They will rest soon," she said, "but I noticed they respond better to morning stimulation first. Their bodies seem more awake, and it helps start their day with movement." Her words were gentle, but inside Daniel felt a storm. She had changed their routine. She had shifted something. She had done it without asking him. The old Daniel, the one who lived only through fear, would have shouted, would have fired her, would have reminded her of every rule she was supposed to follow. But he did not. He just stood there, silent, watching the boys, watching the way their breathing changed around her, watching the tiny little signs he pretended not to see. Tiana noticed his silence. She stepped closer, her voice soft. "They are stronger than they look, Mr. Reed. They just need someone who does not give up when things look hard." Daniel felt that sentence cut through him like a blade. He looked at Tiana sharply, but her eyes did not hold judgment. They held truth, the kind of truth that hurts, but also heals. He looked at his sons again. Lucas's fingers twitched gently, trying to reach toward the toy on his tray. Mason lifted his head slightly when Tiana placed a small mirror in front of him. Jaden moved his hand a few inches when she touched his arm. Each movement was small, almost fragile, but each one felt like a whisper of hope. Daniel swallowed the lump in his throat, his voice quiet as he spoke. "Do you really believe they can improve?" he asked, almost afraid of the question itself. Tiana knelt beside the boys again, her hands steady. "I do not believe," she said. "I know." Children learn, children grow, children adapt, especially when they feel safe, especially when someone believes in them. She looked at the boys with gentle eyes. They are trying every day, even when it is small, even when it is slow. You just have to look closely to see it. Daniel felt another sting behind his eyes, and he rubbed his forehead to hide it. He was not used to feeling this vulnerable, not used to being this exposed. Hours later, he retreated to his office, his breathing still uneven from what he saw. He sat in front of the screens again, but this time the fear felt different. It did not feel like protection anymore. It felt like a habit he wanted to break, but did not know how. He clicked on the live feed again, watching Tiana guide the boys through tiny exercises. His eyes traced every movement, every tremble, every hint of progress. He saw Lucas trying to lift his foot, even if it was only an inch. He saw Mason reaching toward a colorful block with effort that made Daniel's heart ache. He saw Jaden lifting his hand slowly toward her voice. Daniel whispered to himself, barely audible, "I am sorry, Megan. I should have fought harder." He wanted to go into that room. He wanted to stand beside Tiana. He wanted to touch his sons the way she did. But fear held him in place. Fear of failing them. Fear of trying again. Fear of feeling too much. Then something happened that he did not expect. The motion alert pinged. Living room. Daniel frowned. Tiana was still in the therapy room. The boys should have been in their wheelchairs. He clicked the alert. The screen loaded slowly, the image blurry at first. Daniel leaned forward, his heart beating faster, fear rising in his chest like a wave. Then the picture became clear. 3 wheelchairs sat against the wall, empty. Daniel's breath caught, his hands froze, his entire body stiffened. He blinked hard, thinking it was an error, a glitch, something wrong with the camera. But then he saw them. His triplets. Standing. Tiny legs shaking, bodies trembling, arms outstretched. Walking. Walking toward someone kneeling in front of them, someone with shaking hands and tears streaming down her face. It was Tiana. And Daniel felt the floor shift under his feet. His sons were moving. They were walking. And nothing in his life would ever be the same again. Daniel Reed stood frozen in front of the camera screen, his eyes refusing to blink, his breath trapped somewhere in his chest. He could not move, he could not think. Everything inside him felt heavy, shaking, confused, terrified, and full all at once. He leaned closer to the screen, afraid that if he looked away, the moment would disappear like a dream that slips through your fingers when you wake up too fast. His sons were standing. They were standing, trembling on their weak little legs, fighting to stay balanced, fighting to stay upright, fighting to move toward the woman who had believed in them from the first day she walked into his house. Lucas lifted his right foot, then his left, tiny steps that looked almost painful, but steps that meant everything. Mason followed, his hands stretching out in front of him like he wanted to touch the air. Jaden, the smallest, the quietest, the most fragile, lifted his foot slowly, his body shaking, but he tried again and again, determined to reach her. Daniel felt his knees weaken. His hands slipped off the desk, hitting the floor. His whole body lowered itself without him realizing it, until he was sitting on the ground, staring at the screen like a man watching his world break open in front of him. He whispered, "No, no, this cannot be real," his voice cracking, but he could not look away. Tiana knelt a few feet in front of the boys, her arms open, her voice shaking through the speakers. "Come on, babies, come to me. You are doing it. You are doing it. I am right here. I am not moving." The boys stepped again, one step, then another, then another. Daniel covered his mouth with both hands as a sob escaped him. He had not cried like this since the day he held Megan's cold hand in the hospital. Tears poured down his face, his shoulders trembling, his heart breaking and healing at the same time. His sons walked. They walked. The boys reached Tiana and collapsed into her arms, their small bodies exhausted, their breaths shaky, their eyes filled with a spark he had never seen before. Tiana held them tightly against her chest, crying openly, whispering over and over, "I knew it! I knew you could do it! I am so proud of you! Oh, my babies! You did it!" Daniel forced himself to his feet. His legs felt weak, as if they might give out at any second, but he held onto the desk until he could stand on his own. He wiped his tears roughly with the back of his hand, took one shaky breath after another, then walked out of his office. He moved down the hallway with unsteady steps, each footfall heavy, each breath tight. The silence in the mansion felt different now, not empty, not cold, but waiting. He reached the living room doorway and stopped. He saw all four of them on the floor. Tiana sat with the triplets gathered in her arms, rocking them gently, wiping their tears, kissing their foreheads like a mother would. Lucas leaned against her shoulder. Mason clung to her shirt. Jaden clutched her arm with his tiny hand, refusing to let go. Daniel stepped into the room slowly. Tiana looked up at the sound of his footsteps. Their eyes met, and for the first time since she came into his home, Daniel saw something in her expression he could not understand. Compassion. Not for the boys. For him. She gently moved aside, giving him space to reach them. Daniel fell to his knees beside his sons. His knees hit the floor hard, but he did not feel the pain. His hands trembled as he touched Lucas's cheek, then Mason's hair, then Jaden's tiny shoulder. He pulled all three of them into his arms, pressing his face against their heads. His tears fell onto their soft hair, onto their warm skin, onto their tiny hands that tried their best to hold him back. "I am sorry," he whispered, his voice breaking over and over. "I am so sorry. I am sorry for giving up. Sorry for being afraid. Sorry for not seeing what you could do. Sorry for everything." Tiana sat quietly beside them, her hands resting gently on the boys' backs, grounding the moment with her presence. When Daniel finally lifted his head, his eyes met hers again. His voice shook. "How did you know?" he asked softly. "How did you believe they could do this?" Tiana shook her head, wiping her own tears. "I did not know, Mr. Reed," she said, her voice gentle. "I just believed. Children feel who believes in them. They feel who is in their corner. They feel who sees them, even when their bodies cannot move the way they want. They felt loved, so they tried. They tried because they knew someone would not give up on them." Daniel's chin trembled, and he lowered his head. He could not speak. The weight of her words pressed into him, soft and painful at the same time. Tiana looked down at the boys again. "They gave themselves their first steps," she whispered. "I only reminded them that they could try." Daniel looked around the room slowly. 3 wheelchairs stood pushed gently against the wall. They looked different now. Smaller, farther away, almost like they no longer belonged to the moment unfolding in front of him. He breathed out slowly, a long, shaky breath that carried 2 years of fear, guilt, and helplessness. For the first time in 2 years, his home felt alive. He looked at Tiana again, his voice quiet, full of emotion he could not hide. "Thank you," he whispered. "You gave them something I could not. You gave them hope." Tiana lowered her eyes, shaking her head. "No, Mr. Reed," she said softly. "You gave them life. You gave them love. You gave them everything you had. Even when you were hurting, I only helped them show you what they were capable of." Daniel closed his eyes tightly. Soft sobs escaped before he could stop them. He held his sons again, feeling the warmth of their small bodies, feeling their hearts beating against his chest, feeling something he had not felt in years. Hope. Not the fragile hope he feared. Not the hope that broke easily. Real hope. The kind that comes when you fight through the darkness and still choose to believe. He lifted his head slowly, looking around the room, looking at his sons, looking at Tiana, and for the first time in 2 years, he did not feel afraid of tomorrow. He felt ready. Because tomorrow, his boys would wake up again, and he would be there, not behind a screen, not watching from a distance, but beside them, learning with them, fighting with them, believing with them. And that, for Daniel Reed, was the beginning of everything. Dear viewers, this story reminds us that some battles are not fought with strength. They are fought with love, patience, and the quiet courage to believe when everything around you says it is impossible. Daniel Reed lost his wife, lost himself, and almost lost hope. But the love he found in a gentle maid, and the strength he discovered in his 3 little boys, brought light back into a home that had forgotten what warmth felt like. His sons did not just take their first steps, they brought a broken father back to life. If this story touched your heart, please tell us in the comments where you are watching from, and what lesson you learned from Daniel, from Tiana, and from the triplets. Your words help us grow, your love keeps us going, and your presence means more than you know. Do not forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs hope today. And if you want more emotional stories like this, comment more stories, and you will be the first to get the next one. Before you go, answer these 3 questions in the comments. What part of this story touched you the most? What did you learn about hope? And how did this story inspire you today? Your answers help us bring more powerful and emotional stories to life.